Hi, my name is Sam Lamar, and my informative speech is about an incredibly talented individual and a great music entertainer, Elvis Presley. Elvis was born into a poor, working class family to Vernon and Gladys Presley on January 8, 1935. As Elvis grew, he was exposed to gospel, blues, country music that he listened to. Elvis was a white Southerner who sang blues laced with country and country laced with gospel to become the most influential entertainer in the history of popular music. Elvis was rock and roll's first real star. He was also one of the most important cultural forces in history. His music, dance moves, clothing, and his attitude embodied the rock and roll culture of the 1950s. He was fresh and new, became a pivotal figure in the history of rock music. He was a symbol of teenage rebellion, establishing a youth culture and defining rock and roll's new sound. Teenagers began to listen to rock and roll music on 45 RPM record players and transistor radios. He was a hip-shaking symbol of liberation for the teenagers of the 1950s. After World War II, young people in America began to find their own identity, develop their own interests, and create their own idols. He became a teen idol and a role model for generations of cool rebels. He redefined music forever. Parents of the 1950s, on the other hand, felt quite differently as teenagers began to assert their independence from them. They were horrified by this hip shaking and pelvis gyrating type dancing, and many thought him as vulgar, incompetent, and a bad influence on the younger generation. The early 1950s was dominated by white musicians and white musical styles. The rhythm and blues style music of the African American artist had a very small, predominantly African American audience. Elvis seemed to blur the color lines between African American music and white music, upsetting the conservative culture of the 1950s. In a time when segregation was at its highest, Elvis introduced race music to the world. He was a rebel, and during this time any rebel was perceived as a threat. In the 1950s, early rock and roll founders like Bill Haley were seen live by a maximum of 30,000 people per year, give or take 1,000. That all changed in January 1956 when Elvis shocked America by the staggering amount of people he drew to himself. When he began touring, a half a million teenagers saw what he could do on stage live, leaving behind many, many fans wherever he went across America. He had a following of young American women swooning for him all across the country. It was very hard to believe that during this time, one person could have such an unprecedented number of people drawn to him and following him all across the country. It is easy to see that Elvis Presley did have a great impact on music and society in the 1950s. Many believe he was a bad influence on society, but that is not the case. He was a good influence on society. He was a very nice and polite country boy who was respectful to his elders. He also facilitated communications between teenagers and their parents. It cannot be disputed that he opened up doors for many artists, and if it were not for Elvis, we would not have the music that we have today. He also showed that the American dream could be obtained by anyone. A poor boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, with great talent and a tremendous amount of ambition, didn't stop until he became the king of rock and roll. Thank you.